Go to Genesis 1:14. And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. Now, guys, we know that seasons existed from the very beginning. But what it does not say is that the seasons they had in the beginning were the kind of seasons we have right now. Now, when God put the sun, moon, and stars in the sky, He fully intended, notice I said intended, He fully intended for us to have a celestial clock. And when Adam and Eve were first created, they did have a celestial clock. They had a celestial clock for a while, okay? And this is how it works. And y'all, I apologize for using the pagan names of the constellations. I know God has other biblical names for the Mazzaroth, but I'm just putting these up here just to make a point. So here's how the clock worked. You had the moon that was used as a minute hand. The earth was used as the hour hand, with the sun being at the center. And then you have these constellations out here that tell you the month and the season that they would have been in. Now, how it worked was the moon would go through a full cycle for 30 days. And every 30 days, the earth would change hour hand. And every 30 days, the moon would line back up with the sun and start over. And the moon would go around for 30 days and come back to this position and line up with the earth. And then it would go around for 30 days and come back to this position and line up with the earth. And the moon cycle would start over with a new moon every hour hand. Okay? Now, if you are looking from the earth out into the heavens, you would see the sun in a different constellation every month depending on where you were. So if the earth was at the 5-hour hand and you're looking at the sun, you would most likely see the sun in what they call Aquarius. Okay? Now, in order for the sun to start a new year in Aries, the sun and the moon would have to be lined up over here with Libra, and you would see the sun from the Earth's vantage point in Aries. Now, the reason I draw it this way is because the sun represents Jesus and the moon represents the bride, us, okay? Jesus is eternal. There's no time in eternity. That's why the sun doesn't orbit, okay? It was the tilt of the earth that changed the orbit of its moon that caused the creation of time, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit. And this is the beauty and the glory of God, y'all. Now, my views are subject to change on this part, but here's what I believe happened when Adam and Eve fell. They were able to still look in the sky, and they were still able to see the heavenly clock that God had put up there. And it was operating correctly at that time. So God was able to teach Adam the constellations 1 through 12 and teach him the plan of salvation for mankind. And I believe that he also taught Enoch this same system, that you can look in the sky and you can see the moon going through the 30 days, and you can see the earth going through the hour hand, and you can see the sun going through the constellations from the vantage point of the earth. And I believe God taught them the plan of salvation with this. I also believe that the earth did not tilt until the flood. Now, I know what y'all are going to be saying, some of you. Well, we had seasons from the very beginning. Yes, we did. But I believe the seasons were different. Let me explain. Now, Our earth is not completely round. It is not a perfect circle. Because we are rotating on an axis, the earth has a slight bulge at the equator. So the earth is more like this with that bulge. That bulge makes all the difference in the world when we're talking about these 10 days. Okay, guys, that bulge in the middle of the earth is what caused the moon to orbit the earth in a perfect circle, right there at the equator. As far as I can tell, based on my studies, they seem to say or indicate, scientists, that every single moon of every other planet orbits that planet at the equator in a perfect circle. Okay? So if the moon is standing straight up and down, this is what you would have. You would have the moon going around the equator in a perfect circle, and it would go at the same distance. But I believe the earth tilted at the flood. And when the earth tilted, this is what happened to the moon's orbit. Okay? They say it tilted at 23.4 degrees, which left the earth sitting at a 66.6 degree angle. That makes sense to me because it represents the fall of mankind. It represents, the mark of the beast and all that stuff, okay? But what happened was, instead of the moon, if you're in heaven looking down at the earth, this is what you would have seen. You would have seen the moon going around the earth like this. But now with the earth tilted, it took the moon's orbit and changed it to an oval shape. And these two bulges right here, if you can imagine this, these two bulges actually created two perihelion points that were not present when the moon was standing upright. Okay? These perihelion points caused the moon to slingshot around the earth twice a month. That is what sped up the orbit of the moon. And when the moon sped up at those two perihelion points, it actually caused an overall change in the orbit of the earth to decrease by 10 days per year. So the moon lost 10 days of orbit per year. So in the book of Revelation, when Jesus talks about some will have 10 days in prison, some will have tribulation for 10 days, but he said, I would keep you from the hour of trial. What he's talking about here is the fact that when Jesus returns, he's going to reverse the curse. The tilt of the earth is a curse, and I'm going to show you why here in a minute. But what he's doing is he's correcting those 10 days. He's putting the moon back in alignment with the sun where it should be. Now, Jesus is referring to those 10 days between the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement. All right? So what's going to happen is you have the Gentiles who are being kept from the hour of trial. They're going to have a 10-day wait, just like the disciples in the upper room had a 10-day wait. But then you have the Jews who are actually going through the tribulation period who are going to be thrown in prison for 10 days, some of them. He said, be faithful unto death, I'll give you the crown of life. He's talking about the Jewish martyrs and Gentile martyrs and things like that, okay? So those are the 10 days he's referring to. And this is why when we talk about the Feast of Trumpets and the return of Jesus, we also include the New Moon Festival, or the blowing of the trumpet on the new moon, to celebrate the bridal celebration of the new moon. And the reason why they blow that trumpet on the new moon is because it's the celebration of the bride getting married to the groom. But the sun and moon have to be in alignment for that to happen. Okay? Now, when Jesus comes back, I believe the Bible shows us that the moment he steps foot on the Mount of Olives is when the earth is going to stand back up like this. And the reason I say that is because if you think about what's happening when he puts his foot on the Mount of Olives, that seems to indicate that, the moon has, that the earth has stood back up. Okay? When you think about the mountains crumbling and you think about the islands being moved out of their place and you think about how much catastrophic damage would have to be done to the earth for that kind of stuff to take place, you're talking about the earth tilting back up, standing back up. Okay? When it talks about Jesus setting foot on the Mount of Olives and that mountain cleaving, one half going one way and the other half going the other way, I think we're seeing a massive shift in the earth that's causing earthquakes everywhere. These mountains are falling. The volcanoes are going off. Tsunamis are everywhere. Islands are going to be flooded to the point where they don't exist anymore and that kind of thing. Okay? Now, if we take that 10 days per year and we divide it up among the 364 days, that comes out to 40 minutes per day. What does that mean? Why would that even matter if we're talking about 40 minutes per day? Guys, this would explain why we had all those 40s in the Bible. It rained 40 days and 40 nights. Moses in the wilderness for 40 years. The Israelites in the wilderness for 40 years. Jesus tempted 40 days and 40 nights. Moses went up on the mountain 3 times for 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus walked the earth 40 days and 40 nights before he ascended. Why did he do that? He was symbolizing the fact that he is going to reverse the curse. So when the moon gets back in right alignment and the earth is standing up straight, we will not have a 10-day variance between the lunar month and the solar month anymore. Okay? At that point, our calendars are going to be right again. Our celestial time clock is going to be correct again. During the millennial reign, we're going to be able to see what Adam and Eve saw. Okay? We're going to be able to look up and we're going to be able to see the story that God was telling. If you think about the Mazzaroth from our vantage point, Adam and Eve were actually seeing a different set of constellations than what we're seeing. They saw these constellations. We're looking at these constellations because of the tilt of the earth. So I think what they saw in the heavens was probably God telling them how he has already planned to save mankind and how he already has saved mankind. But this Mazzaroth that we're looking at, and I think there's a crossover between these two Mazzaroths, okay? I think there's some of the same constellations. But I think the earth tilted just enough that our Mazzaroth is telling us about the first coming and the second coming of Jesus, whereas this Mazzaroth probably sang the glory of God and how he saved mankind and it's already done. And I think there's a crossover between these two with some of the same constellations. Remember how the Apostle John said he saw a new heaven and a new earth? Well, if you think about it, when the earth gets tilted back into its original position straight up and down, that's going to cause a lot of catastrophic damage to the earth. It's going to change the makeup of the earth completely, okay? And it's also going to give us a new heaven in the sense that we're going to see the constellations Adam and Eve saw, and Enoch and everybody else. We're going to see those other constellations. So yeah, we'll have a new heaven, all right? think about what John said. He said there was no more sea, no more ocean. All right? Let me tell you what I think that's all about. I think when God created the earth, He created the earth, and this is just my opinion, y'all. I think He created the earth with freshwater oceans. I don't think John means to tell us that God's going to take away our oceans, because everybody that I know loves the ocean. It's just beautiful. It's gorgeous. But I think they were freshwater bodies. I really do. I think that at the flood, when the fountains of the deep broke up, I think there was massive amounts of salt water inside the earth's core. And I think that salt water is what came out and mixed with the freshwater oceans, along with all the bad, hideous creatures that Satan had probably come up with, and like sharks and things like that. I don't see God making that kind of stuff. I don't. And I think those waters came and mixed with the fresh water that was on the earth and created the oceans we have today. And this right here, this new moon or lunar orbit, as you would say, this was needed. It was needed for the massive bodies of water that we were going to have on the earth to correct the tides and things like that. Okay? But I think when Jesus comes back, it's going to be okay to have the moon like this again, because I think Jesus is probably going to separate the salt water from the fresh water and send the salt water back into the heart of the earth. And I think when John talked about no more sea, I think he was referring specifically to salt water. And if you think about the nature of salt water, what does salt do? It kills infection, right? Chicken noodle soup, full of salt. We eat that for an upset stomach, right? Salt water is a healing agent, okay? It kills infection. So when God created hell inside the earth, I think He used salt water as a barrier, the fountains of the deep. I think He used that as a barrier between hell and earth to keep the earth healed, okay? But then when mankind started dying, the fountains of the deep broke open. The salt water came to the surface. And the salt water is used for the healing of the land right now because there's so many dead bodies in it. I mean, really. It's 2/3 salt water and 1/3 land. It's 2/3 healing. You know what I'm saying? And I think that when John said no more sea, I think what he was talking about was not necessarily the ocean. I think he was talking about the salt water itself and all the hideous creatures that are in it. I think we're still going to have oceans. I think we're still going to have dolphins and fish that we can eat and all the beautiful creatures that God made. All right? I think they're going to be much smaller bodies of water. And I think that the salt water is going to have to return to the inside of the earth for the millennial reign. And the reason I think that is because we are told in the Bible that hell is going to expand its borders. And we're actually seeing evidence of that now. You think about all these massive sinkholes that keep opening up in the earth everywhere. That's because hell is expanding its borders. It's causing the earth to pop open. And because of all the people that hell is going to receive, unfortunately, we're going to need that barrier again between the earth's surface and the earth's core. And I believe that salt water is going to serve as that barrier between the two. Now, the last thing I have to consider are the 4 seasons. What in the world is this going to do to our seasons in the millennial reign? If you recall at the beginning of the video, I told you that Adam and Eve had seasons. They had 4 seasons. But they had different seasons. Go back to the celestial clock I had up a while ago. And you know I had those constellations out here, right? Well, the first 3 constellations would have been spring. The second 3 are summer, fall, winter, so forth. So when you're looking from the Earth's vantage point, you would have known what season you were in, okay? What makes it different now than it did from the beginning of time? Well, we have to ask ourselves a question. Why, when Adam and Eve fell, we all pretty much understand that God used the skin of a lamb to make them their wool clothing, okay? But we have to ask ourselves a question. If they fell in the fall, why didn't God have them make their own wool clothing? I mean, I understand the symbolism behind the lamb had to die to cover their sins. I get that. But the wool clothing is what got to me. Why did they need wool clothing so quickly? Think about the temperatures we have right now. If we go from 6 a.m. to noon, noon to 6, 6 to midnight, and midnight back around to 6, it doesn't matter what season we are in. We have approximately a 10-degree shift in weather throughout the 4 periods of our day. Okay? So, in essence, what we're seeing is a lesser version of the 4 seasons every single day. But the temperatures are kept within a certain range. Okay? But our spring, summer, fall, and winter, our 4 seasons, we're actually seeing about a 40-degree change in temperature between seasons, okay? So our spring and fall can average, and I know different places have different temperatures, but where I'm at, this is about what it looks like, okay? We have... we could go from 60 in the spring up to 100 in the summer, back down to 60s in the fall, all the way down to the 20s in the wintertime. All right? So, remember the 10-40 I was showing you a while ago? The 10-day difference in the moon, 40 minutes per day for a 364-day year? Well, look what's happening to our temperatures. Approximately a 10-degree shift every day throughout the day, with approximately 40-degree shifts in temperatures throughout the seasons. Now, when the earth stands back up and Jesus reverses that curse, what do you think is going to happen to our temperatures? Do you think they're going to reverse? What I do think is going to happen is, instead of having spring, summer, fall, and winter for 3 months out of the year, I think we're going to have spring, summer, fall, and winter every single day, because the earth's not going to be tilted towards the sun. Okay? And if you stop and think about it, the variance in temperature between the seasons is going to be very small compared to the variance of temperature throughout the day. Okay? So here's what I think might happen in the millennial reign. During the summertime, you might have a 60 in the morning up to 90 throughout the day, back down to 60 in the evening, and then around 50 at night. Nobody would ever need air conditioning. You could sleep at night and be perfectly comfortable every single night. But you get to enjoy the 4 seasons every day. I mean, think about how much fun summertime would be. You go work your garden in the morning, you go swimming during the day or go fishing, whatever, and then in the evening time, you can have a campfire, have people over, and then sleep like a rock at night. Yeah, I mean, are you kidding me, right? But then in the wintertime, I think we might see something more like 40 in the morning, 70 during the day, 40 in the evening, and 30s at night. Okay? So there's a huge variance of temperature during the day, but a small variance of temperature throughout the 4 seasons, because the earth is not tilted toward the sun anymore, but the earth is still rotating around the sun in an oval shape, not a perfect circle. So there are going to be points where the earth will be closer to the sun, making it warmer, and points where the earth is further away from the sun, making it a little colder. But we can have all 4 seasons throughout the day in the summertime, basically, and it won't kill our crops. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? This is going to be so much fun. This is why I believe Adam and Eve probably needed wool clothing when God made them that clothing out of wool, because even though they still had good weather at that time, if they were experiencing all 4 seasons every single day, they were going to need wool clothing for that night. Now back to Noah. Guys, I believe this is the reason why God made Noah stay on the ark an extra 10 days. This is when I believe the earth tilted and the moon fell out of sync. Now why 10 days? Why did the moon fall out of sync by 10 days? It's because 10 days is 1/3 of a 30-day month. And Jesus is 1/3 of the Trinity, who had to come down here and die for us. Okay? This is why I think that Noah had to wait an extra 10 days to get off the ark. And this is also why I believe, part of the reason why I believe, God had to give Moses the first day of the year. You could not look in the heavens and tell. Not only that, Moses had come out of Egypt. He learned a different calendar system, and God didn't want him to know that one. So I told you we were going to talk about the 3 last trumps. We know there's a last trump on Feast of Trumpets. The last trumpet they blow that day is called the last trump. All right? On Day of Atonement, if there is a Jubilee year, the last trumpet is actually blown on Day of Atonement rather than Feast of Trumpets in a Jubilee year. That trumpet signifies the following year or the upcoming year as being a Jubilee year. Okay? But the 3rd last trumpet is on Tabernacles. Let me show you. Look at Numbers 2 and 3. Numbers 10, verses 2 and 3. Make thee 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Now, let's go to Leviticus 23:36. In Leviticus 23:36, he's talking about the Feast of Tabernacles. He said, 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. On the 8th day shall be a holy convocation unto you. And ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. Moses was told to blow the trumpets for the assembly at the tabernacle. Okay? And here in Leviticus 23:36, he's saying, blow the trumpet by telling us it's a solemn assembly. And it also seems to indicate that this trumpet is either blown on the first day and the last day, or it may be blown all 7 days. But either way, there is a last trump associated with tabernacles. So now that we have 3 possible last trumps, let's go to the calendar and look at our possibilities. Look at the mirror image we have going on. Jesus rode through Jerusalem on a donkey, the 10th day of the 1st month. 7 days later, he resurrected. Okay? Noah got on the ark the 10th day of the 2nd month. 7 days later, it was raining. Okay? 40 days after the resurrection, Jesus ascended. Look at that. It's the same day Noah got off the ark, 1 year and 10 days later. 40 days from the day it started raining brings you approximately to the time that Moses went up on the mountain the first time. Okay? This particular calendar year, the Jews are going to be celebrating they're going to be recognizing the day of the flood around November the 17th, somewhere in there. Okay? So look, you have the same parallel here. On the 10th day would be Day of Atonement. 7 days later, the flood starts according to what the Jews believe. All right? 40 days later brings you to Hanukkah. All right? Hanukkah means dedication, and we know that tabernacles represents the birth of a child. So it's the dedication of the child that's been born. Y'all remember in John, I think it's chapter 7, where Jesus said, he was talking about the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, and he made a point to tell us it was the Jewish feast, okay? He said, I go not up to this feast. But then he turned around and went up to the Feast of Tabernacles in the midst of the feast, right? He's alluding to the two calendars. He's telling us the Jews are going to have their own calendar and their calendar's going to be off. And he's telling us God has his true calendar, and that's the Feast of Tabernacles that he's going to honor. Okay? So in John chapter 7, Jesus is saying, I go not to the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, for the time has not yet fully come. But at the real tabernacles, I go up in the midst. And we know that the Jews are going to recognize the flood date as starting in the midst of God's true tabernacles.